Hey, this is Stephanie.
And I'm Nina.
And you're listening to Live by the Spirit podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
What's up?
We're back.
We're back and better than ever.
Why was that the first thing that went through my head?
What?
I was about to say we're back and better than ever, but then you said it.
That's weird.
I know. Last night we were at my dad's End Times group, and which actually is super fun. I know it doesn't sound entertaining, but it's low-key kind of fun.
I think it's funny.
But we were talking about the bowls. Where does
the 7 bowls.
The 7 bowls that start in verse.
It's chapter 16.
Why are my pages quite literally sticking together?
I think it's your highlighter.
Oh, but I just was like, okay, this might be a dumb question, but is it like a literal bowl? Like, and I was about to say,
was a good question.
Yeah, but I was literally about to say, this is what went through my head. I was like, is it like a literal bowl, like you eat cereal out of? Like, I didn't say, do you eat cereal out of? But I was like, is it a literal bowl? And then my dad looked at me. He's like, it's not like it is a bowl, but it's not like a literal bowl that you eat cereal out of. It was just the fact that we had the exact same like perception of what goes into a bowl. Like, obviously I'm his child, but it was one of those moments like, wow, you and I are think a lot alike.
It was funny.
What? How did we just it's because I said similar.
You said we're back and I said we're better than ever.
Oh, so
better than ever at 10:58 a.m. on a Saturday.
Yeah, Nina spent the night last night.
Dude, and I literally, Steph was like, what time do we want to get up? I said, let's get up at 9. Guess who slept at 10 until 10?
You did.
I did.
I woke up at 9. I was good. I waited patiently.
I think I needed
You needed sleep.
That was a segue right there.
What? Oh.
You said I waited patiently.
Oh, I did wait patiently.
Yeah,
we watched, because last night was Friday. We had a summer I Turned Pretty watch party with Nina, myself, and our friend Olivia. Mm-hmm. I went all out. I got us. If you have no idea what we're talking about, I'm so sorry, but if you do, you're the real ones. I got us some Kool-Aid. I got us Junior Mints. I got us like these little Debbie cakes and wrote Team Conrad on them.
Oh my gosh.
Did I get anything else?
And then as we started to eat the little Debbie cakes, Olivia and I started playing bananagrams with them.
Yes, because we played that at the beach trip. So now it's like a
so much
habit.
I love bananagrams. But yeah, and we also had pizza, which Steph undercooked, and it was very doughy.
I put it in for the time that
no, you didn't.
Suggested. It said 21 minutes. I put it in for 20 minutes. How much could have one
left it in at least 4 more minutes because the middle was so doughy.
Oh well, we woke up fine.
It's fine.
But there was a moment in this episode where I quite literally stood up and ran.
She stood up and walked away.
I was like,
and then she started screaming, and I was like, you need to stop because I'm trying to listen to what is going on and the song in the background too. And I'm like, dude, I cannot. You're literally screaming.
It was just,
but the amount of times I felt so bad for Olivia, the amount of times we paused
to assess
and had to talk because this series came from a book series
that Nina and I are very, very passionate about.
The books were fantastic.
Great books.
So like moving into a series where they're not necessarily, oh my. Okay. That was weird. I don't know if that popped up on there, but it says we're still recording.
Nina got a notification.
It like shut my whole screen off for a second. I was really confused. Anyways, yeah, they're not necessarily following the book, and so we are just throwing out there why we're confused in different things and we're just to talk through it.
Well, it's also like pausing it and being like, okay, let's think of it from a book perspective, what was going on in the books.
Yeah.
And that's just how Nina and I do a lot of stuff. Like another show that Nina and I absolutely love together is Anne with an E, and we've probably watched that show like at least like a gajillion times through with each other, but even still we still pause it to assess what's going. That's just our friendship. And so
and then it's like when I watch things by myself, I never do that, but it's funny that we do that.
I think I do it in my head, or I text you. Like we always have conversations about it after the fact, but that was the first time Nina and I sat down together to watch an episode for the first time. So
it was funny because we did that when we watched Outer Banks, though.
We watched all of Outer Banks together.
we did that same thing. We stopped and we assessed, which is funny because I would not normally do that.
I just love that we can both do that together.
Yeah, I think other people would definitely get annoyed.
Yeah, we do that with the word together too.
So
segue back to the purpose of
what we were talking about. Steph mentioned she waited patiently.
I waited patiently this morning
for this morning. So we're going to talk about waiting.
Dun dun dun.
Which is funny because last night we were talking about what we wanted to record and nobody said anything for like 5 minutes. And I was like, "What about waiting?" She goes, "Why was that the first thing on my mind?" Because I think it's something that so clearly both of us are going through right now, and I think that we're both doing different things during our waiting period. We're both dealing with different things, but also similar things. And so...
Yeah, and we should specify, Nina and I are both looking for a husband.
Oh my gosh, you make it sound like we're advertising.
We're taking applications.
No, we're not. Just kidding. That is the wrong approach to waiting.
But I think I just wanted to give that context in what maybe our purpose is and some of the things that we're talking about and how we're waiting now. And I'm sure like as we get into some stuff, I have some examples of things that I waited for that came true, or maybe things that I thought I needed to wait for that ended up not coming true, and how the Lord saved me from things. I'm sure Nina has similar stories. So there's many different types of waiting. It's just the current season that we are both in together that we relate on is the waiting on our husbands.
Yeah.
So, and something the Lord has been really, and I shared this with Nina via voice memo earlier this week, something the Lord's been really encouraging me on when it comes to this, because I know a lot of you guys who listen obviously are our friends and maybe also going through this same season as well. The Lord reminded me of a scene from the movie Hook the other day, which I love that movie, but there's a scene where Peter is with the Lost Boys and he's thinking that they're about to eat dinner, and they take the lids off of everything and there's no food there, but the Lost Boys are pretend eating food, and Peter's like, "There's no food here, like what are you doing?" And they're trying to tell him that he needs to use his imagination and then the food will appear, and he's like just looking really confused. But the second that Peter tapped into his imagination and started to imagine food and like leaning into it, all of a sudden this humongous feast appeared, and he was able to eat and all this stuff. And so I was like, "Lord, why did you remind me of this scene earlier this week?" And I felt the Lord really encourage me. He was like, if you do not imagine yourself as a bride, as a wife, as a mother, how do you expect those things to happen? Because I think I can say this confidently for me, I think sometimes the enemy gets into my head and says, well, that just will never happen for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it will. I just have to trust God. But it's like deep down, I'm like thinking to myself, maybe it won't actually happen. And so hearing that so clearly from the Lord this week has just been really encouraging. So something like I've just been making steps in order to do that. And so just again, like just closing my eyes and imagining myself as a bride, talking about my husband, because this is something I encourage you with. Our husbands are out there somewhere in the world doing things. They're doing something. And that's just so encouraging to think about, that they're out there somewhere. I think sometimes we don't realize that they're out there living their lives. But yeah, and it was crazy because earlier this summer, I had told Nina, I was like, I was never the type of girl to make a Pinterest board for my wedding or my dress or stuff like that. And then literally 2 days later, I texted her, I was like, the Lord just told me to make a Pinterest board.
It's so to circle back to your point about imagine yourself as a bride, because if we don't, we need to be expectant when we wait on the Lord. And so one thing that for me, was told to me many years ago, but I still think about it, is like, we serve a big God. Why do we think he is incapable of doing these things for us?
Yeah.
We have seen his faithfulness over and over and over again in our lives. So why do we think that he can't do it just because the enemy tells us he can't? The enemy tells us, oh, well, God isn't going to give you that because this. Oh, he really doesn't love you enough to give you that. But it's like, we know the truth. We know how faithful the Lord is. We know how much he loves us. So why, when we pray, do we pray for these small things? We should be making big prayers to our big God and be expectant that he's going to show up.
Yeah.
Because he knows the desires of our hearts and he knows how faithful we are to him. So he will be faithful. It's just a matter of, making sure that when we wait, we're waiting with the right heart and we're praying for the right things. Sorry, that didn't come out right.
No, that made sense.
We're praying and we're also being expectant, because if you pray and you just leave it be, how do we ever, like, where's your heart in that? Do you really ever expect God to be able to do that if you're not thinking, if you're doubting that he's going to do it?
Well, it's so true. Faith without works is dead.
Yes.
And so in this context of obviously like waiting, all we can do is wait, but it's also while we're waiting, there are things that we can do, and we can get into it in a little bit of exactly what you and I are doing, and maybe seeing some suggestions for other people, because there are things that I've read about doing that I've started doing that make me feel like, even just like the Pinterest board I said, I feel like is just one example of me being in more preparation and me being expectant of stuff. But anyways,
well, in circling to the faith without works is dead, I forget who I was talking with about this, or maybe I was listening to a podcast. And it's like, people take that verse and they're like, what do you mean? I thought we didn't need to, like, faith comes from our faith, not what we do for the Lord. But it's like, our works are a direct, like, link to our faith because we serve. And it's like, that works is just proof and evidence of our faith, because we want to go out and serve. We want to be doing this, this, and this. And it's like, it truly shows, like, our works show where our heart really is.
Yeah. I can think of, we were just kind of talking.
Why does my water taste like pizza?
I don't know. Did you put pizza in the water?
No, it's kind of gross though.
Ew, that's nasty.
Sorry.
Anyways, we were kind of just quickly talking about some examples of people in the Bible who waited, and I have a couple of, I have a list of different people, and we won't get into all of this, but like Abraham and Sarah waiting for a son, and Nina even pointed out, it's like, they didn't wait perfectly. They tried to take matters into their own hands, but ultimately they did wait for the Lord, and then, you know, they got their son. Joseph waited for a promotion. Moses waited to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Joshua waited for the promised land. Ruth waited for a husband. David waited to become king. Elijah waited for rain. Job waited for suffering to end, and Paul waited to be released from prison. It's so crazy, because I feel like the one story that my Sunday school teacher really leaned on when it came to waiting was Elijah waiting for the rain, because of just how, like, as kids, we're obviously not thinking about our future spouse, but it's like we do think about water and rain and stuff. So it was really cool seeing that on the list, because it like almost brings me back to being a kid and learning about like trusting the Lord and that the Lord will provide at the right time.
Or a Cinderella story.
Oh yeah, when Chad Michael Murray and Hilary Duff,
they finally kiss. He goes, "Sorry, I waited for the rain."
No,
because they're in a drought.
No, it's because
movie.
she said she's waiting for you. Is
like
waiting for rain in this drought. Pointless,
useless, and
disappointing.
Well, because they're in a drought, and then it finally rains when they finally get together. So he waited for the rain.
He's like, "Sorry, I waited for the rain." Oh, what a good movie.
Sorry.
I mean, kind of good example though.
Well, it's true, and like also. Like when we talk about waiting, it's like we're so quick to be impatient, and patience is a fruit of the Spirit. You know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's fruit of the Spirit. We're called to, like, from our faith, that's what comes out of it, are those fruits. And so it's like when we're talking about waiting, we're also talking about faithfulness, because we need to have faith. We need to be faithful. And the first thing that Jonah is calling me. This is not the right time. I am recording.
Jonah, we love you, just not right now.
In Genesis 15:6, it says, and he, talking about Abraham, but it's Abram at the time, he believed the Lord and he counted it to him as righteousness. And it's like throughout all the scripture, because Abraham is called the father of faith. And so all throughout scripture, it talks about it in Galatians. It talks about, where else does it talk about it? I think it talks about it in James. It talks about it in like First Peter or something. Like it mentions so many times about how Abraham believed in the Lord when the Lord gave him this promise of a son, and he believed the Lord and it was counted to him as righteousness. So it's like we need to continue to believe the Lord when he gives us these promises that he's given to us. If you read the word, you need to believe what it says, because if we don't believe what it says, we don't believe that the Lord can do it. So it's like we need to believe that.
Yeah, in James 5. I mean, it's more so talking about waiting for the Lord to come back, but it does say be patient until the Lord's coming.
Yes.
And obviously that means it means the Lord will be coming back to, save us. But I think also I can take that in the context of be patient in the Lord and what is like the plans that the Lord has coming into your life too. And there's so many different like areas in the Bible that touch on that too. I know for me, I can give an example in my own life of a time that I waited and the Lord fulfilled a promise. I mean, I can think of several, and I'm sure Nina has a couple to share, but I'll be pretty vulnerable here. I got let go from a job last October. It was out of the blue. I did not see it coming. They didn't really necessarily give me a particular reason as to why. It was just all of a sudden, you no longer work here. And it was the first time in my life where the second it happened, I rejoiced in the Lord, which a lot of times when I've gone through trials in my life, I have blamed God. So I remember I rejoiced in the Lord, and then I paused for a second. I was like, look at the growth that I've done. And then I was like, okay, back to reality. I just got let go from my job. I need to figure out what to do. But so obviously I waited for a job. James 1 was like my rock and my anchor during that season. Just, going into, verse 2, consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing, which is just crazy. And so time was ticking basically for me to get a new job, and I had to let my apartment complex know middle of February. I remember specifically it had to be on a Wednesday whether or not I was going to get to renew my lease. And it was looking as if I was going to have to move back in with my dad, and which wouldn't have necessarily been an issue, but after, living on my own for 2 years and, being 25, it wasn't necessarily it wasn't something I was super excited about, but, I knew I was going to be okay no matter what, and I just had to trust the Lord. But so I had to let them know on a Wednesday, and it was a Tuesday that I ended up getting a call saying that I finally got a job. Like, talk about, like, I had faith until the end. And we have a friend, Georgie, who had a dream that I had told her that I got the job just in time. So I'd been leaning on that prophetic dream. And I remember
maybe like a month.
For like a month or two.
Yeah.
And I remember called her and I was like, I got the job just in time. Like, it was so true. But during that season of waiting, I was like, okay, God, I got let go for a reason. Like, even though I don't know what it is, like, teach me what I need to be doing in this waiting season of looking for a job while I was looking for a job. And I grew so much closer with the Lord during that season. We had so much happen in our church life. We had an album released in our church life that I was able to fully help when it came to marketing. We just even growing close. Like, I just felt like our church body was growing closer together. There was just so much we had learned. The week before was when Eddie Turner came to our church to talk to us about how to let go of anxiety.
The week before she got
literally
let go.
A week before. And so
it was crazy timing. Like, it was actually was like he came the 5th, you got let go the 19th. So it was like quite literally exactly 2 weeks prior. Like, we had just had this whole thing. And you can share. I mean, I know we've talked about that before, but.
Well, he basically just gave us tools to be able to help combat anxiety and depression. So because I was let go, that gave me several months of being home with the Lord to really start practicing those, because it is one thing to learn a tool, it is another thing to master a tool, and that's still something that I deal with. But because of that, I feel like I was able to relinquish anxiety a lot faster because I had nothing better to do. And I was really proud of the growth that I had. And like, it wasn't easy. And there were days where I did sadly let the enemy take over my mind and my thoughts. And it was really heartbreaking. But I had that trust in the Lord during that waiting season. It's like, I never once questioned that I was not ever going to get a job again. Like, I knew I was going to get a job again. It just may not have been in the way that I wanted to. I think my greatest fear, I was going to have to go back to retail. And if you know, I hated retail. But the Lord also knew the desire in my heart in that. And so anyways. And I look back now, almost, I mean, it's been 6 months since I got that job. Like what the Lord had saved me from, I was sadly starting to lead like not living the most Christ-like life with those coworkers. Not saying that those coworkers are bad, but like going out and drinking and partying, maybe even using foul language and different things like that. And now I think of what the Lord has saved me from and the job that I have now that the Lord's blessed me with, and the opportunities that I've had this year that I wouldn't have had if I was still at that job. And so while I encourage you in this, while situations happen that don't make sense in the moment, eventually one day they're all going to make sense. And that's something that I've been saying to you a lot recently. It's like one day we're going to be at each other's weddings and we're going to look at each other and be like, it all makes sense now.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
I had two thoughts. One off of your James verse, where it talks about how we're going to meet trials of various kind. And read that verse again for me.
I'm going to read that again, but I'm also going to read verse 12 because that was my testimony verse and I forgot to read it during that time. But so it's 2-4. It's consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. And then verse 12, and I underlined this and put that it was my testimony verse during this time. Blessed is the one who endures trials, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Man.
Right off of that, brought me right to Romans 5. But we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. It's Romans 5:3-5. But it brought me right there, because when it says, when it talks about endurance, it's like when we endure, it produces that good character in our lives, and that character produces hope, and our hope is in Jesus, and we know that he's going to provide over and over and over again. But yeah, I forgot what my other thought was. I'll think about it eventually, maybe. But
do you have an example of a season you waited on and then the Lord fulfilled it and it makes sense now?
Dude, do I? So I'm going to try to not make this super long-winded. When I was 18, well, Steph and my brother both went to the same college out in Illinois, Olivet Nazarene University. And I went to visit my brother a few times, and I always felt like I've always wanted to go out of state. I've always wanted to move. And so in December, I went to Purple and Gold Days, which means you go and you stay the night. You go into Chicago. You visit the campus. You're able to talk to people within certain majors.
It's like a chance for juniors and seniors from high school to come to campus, spend the night, be away from their parents, and get to experience sit in on a class, get to experience college for like a weekend.
And it was super cool. And so after that, I quite literally put down a deposit, was headed to go to Olivet. And if you guys know, May 1st is often called Decision Day, because it's when, as high school seniors, you decide or you announce what college you're going to. Big thing.
National Decision Day.
And so I was fully headed, because, on Decision Day in high school, they're like, wear your t-shirt for your college next year. And I showed up to school wearing an Olivet shirt, as one does when you've committed to a university and have put down a deposit. And I remember that day, or if it was around that time, I think within the same week, my parents sat me down and were like, because I paid for college all entirely myself, and my parents didn't do that for me. So it's like the money I had saved, my mom was like, okay, let's look at this. We know how much it costs Jonah to go to school there. It's going to be around the same. You have X amount of money, which will get you through the first year, but where is the extra money coming from the next 3 years that you're going to be in school? And I was like, I don't get what you're saying. She said, either you take a gap year and you save money, you go local, or you don't go. And I was like, well, I am not taking a gap year. This is stupid. Why would I do that? I'm going to be a year behind everybody. I'm not doing that. And ultimately, against everything, I ended up going to school 25 minutes away from my house in New York, in Niagara Falls. I hated every second of it. I was very bitter about it. I didn't want to go. I was mad. And I remember going to like Bible study, and one of the girls there was asking me like what was going on. Like, she didn't really know me well, and I told her this whole story, and she's like, well, Nina, I just want to let you know that I'm glad you're here. Even though you might not be glad you're here, I want you to know I'm glad you're here. And I'd never had somebody say that to me before. And, you know, I ended up really liking my experience there. Not say I loved it. There was a lot, but I had a very positive experience most of it. Especially with the people that I was around and the things I was part of, like I was part of college ministry. I was a part of student government. I was part of a lot of different things, and the things I was part of were great, but I still felt like stuck. And then COVID hit, got sent home, graduated eventually, and then not eventually, like I did it late, but graduated December 2021, and I was like, maybe I'm going to go back to school for a semester to, you know, get extra certification. I don't know what I'm doing, just to waste time, I guess. Nobody hires teachers in December, and I went back for one day, called my mom on the way home. I said, I'm withdrawing right now. I cannot just allow myself just to go to school anymore. It was awful. And that day, it became a realization of like, I have two options here. I'm done with school. If I stay, I need to find a job. So it's find a job or go somewhere else to find a job. And to me, it didn't really seem like an option. It seemed like I just had to find a job around here. And then I don't even know. My mom might remember more. I just highlights stick out to me about that time. Just like knowing that somehow we ended up looking at Tennessee and eventually having that come full circle where the Lord completely provided a job, an apartment, everything perfectly that lined up in the right way. It was exactly what I needed. I had the money to do it, and ended up just moving. And I remember like within 6 months of this even becoming a reality.
It happened really fast.
It happened very fast. And like looking back on it now, like I didn't actually officially decide to move until mid-February, and I moved in June 20th. So it's like it happened so quickly. And then, you know, coming for full circle now, looking back at it, because even at the time I was in this weird state of like almost depression. I didn't really talk to anybody and everything. And but like looking back on it now, this is a promise that the Lord gave to me how many years ago? 5 years ago, that finally came to fruition 4 years after the fact. And I was able to do that. And at the time I didn't thank God for it, but it's like, thank you, God, because look at where I am now. And I would not have been able to be who I am living the life that I'm doing without him. And if I had stayed, like I would be a completely different person. And so it's like that waiting on that, even though it took a really long time and I wasn't even really giving credit where credit was due, but it's like looking where I'm at now, like I know that the Lord provided that for a reason, and I'm here for a reason. And I wasn't ready in 2018 when I wanted to leave.
Yeah.
I was ready at the time, and I'm where I'm at because I waited.
Yeah. That makes me think, and I shared this during our community episode with Chad and Josiah.
Yeah.
In high school, there were times where I got bullied, and I just never felt like I never felt quite like I fit in with those kids, even though I knew those kids for 11 years of my life. I just felt like an outsider. I didn't really feel like I had a place. And so for years I prayed, Lord, like help me find friends that like love me and all these things. And the Lord's, in every season that I've walked through since, the Lord's given me people in my life, and I'm super grateful for it. But it was about 3 or 4 months ago, we were, I think, just hanging out like after church, like on a Sunday night or something like that. And I just heard the Lord say, this is what you prayed for all those years ago. This is the promise. The promise is like, I fulfilled what you asked. Like, this is my promise to you. And it was like, I'm thinking to myself, wow, it's been like 10 years of that prayer. And I didn't even think until the Lord said that to me. I didn't even think about that. And it's just like, it's because I've been so grateful for the season and everything like that. And I've thanked the Lord for the community, but not in that way. Yeah. And so when the Lord pointed that out to me, I felt so bad because I was like, crap, like, dang, I should have been thanking you this whole entire time for blessing me. Because again, I've been thanking the Lord for my community since I've been in my community. I want to express that, but I hadn't thanked him for that prayer I prayed so long ago, and used to like think like when I was like 16, just being in my room super depressed, feeling like I had nobody, and just like even when I was super mad at God, still knowing that one day God was going to fulfill those promises to me. Like, it was just one of those things. It was like, it took 10 years, but wow, like I am so thankful. I wasn't thankful in the moment, I can't lie, but I'm so thankful for the journey that I had to go through, because it makes me so much more protective, so much more, I guess the only other word is thankful. Like, I'm so thankful for the community that I have now. And it's like, I'm not going to jeopardize what we have for anything. And I think it's great. And again, we've talked about this a lot, but I think it's great that all of us are in the same headspace about it. None of us want what we have to end.
And I think it's cool. Oh my gosh. It just left my brain.
It's okay. It's 11:28.
What did you just say?
I was talking about how the Lord fulfilled that promise that I prayed when I was
in. That.
And then I said like how thankful and how protective I am.
Yes, I remember. It's cool looking back at it as well. Like, you can look and see every place where the Lord protected you along the way by waiting. And it's like, it's so evident, because it's like, you don't know what you would have been doing or what you might have gotten caught up in had this, like, not saying necessarily the community aspect, but like looking back at my story, if I had moved in 2018, what would my life have been like? The Lord was clearly protecting me from something by making me wait and making me, dive into the word more with the people I had there, build my faith in a way that prepared me for that. So it's like, you need to look at that as well. Like, the Lord really does protect us all the way, even though we might not see it in the moment.
And it's so crazy how different everyone is, because for me, going to Olivet was something the Lord knew I needed. That was something that I didn't necessarily, it's so funny, it's something I didn't necessarily want to do, but I was so thankful that I was going to an actual university, and like I was moving away, like all that. But like, never in my life did I think I was gonna, like, I wanted to be in a sorority. I was like I'm thinking to myself, like, I wanted to party and I can't do any of that, all of it. And then I go to this small school I never toured before, and the Lord was so fruitful to me during that season. And it's crazy how different people's stories can be of how what the Lord knew I needed in that moment was what the Lord said you didn't need in that moment. So I think that's also crazy. Well, we've shared some examples. I'm gonna I think we both have a couple more verses, and then I think we can talk about exactly what we're doing in this season of preparation. One verse that has always hit home for me is Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. I think sometimes we get caught up in the, kind of like with Abraham and Sarah, we get so caught up in the waiting season, and it's like, well, actually, am I supposed to be doing this? Like, am I supposed to be helping the Lord? Like, I can think right now in this whole waiting season when it comes to finding a husband, it's like, well, should I be going out? Like, should I be and I think that they're like, I think obviously you need to go places where they're gonna, like, if you just stayed at your house, like we said this in a relationship episode. We made a joke. My dad said, what do you expect your husband to show up at your front door? Like, there is
knock.
Hasn't come yet. But I think there's obviously like going out and stuff and like meeting new people. That's always good. But I think if your sole purpose in doing anything is to find a spouse, then obviously that's not like good intentions.
It's not where your heart should be.
No, I think it's a bonus. It's like whenever we go to like a friend's church or something like that, and we meet like guys who just happen to be single, I think it's like that's like an added bonus, but that's not like my goal when I go to places. But
that verse reminded me of Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God.
Yeah, it's just again, it's like when I think of Abraham and Sarah, it's like everything that they tried to do to help move the process along, that didn't end up helping, because the Lord's like, no, it's still my timing. It's still what's, what I need to do. And so for us, it's like, if I'm being honest, like this time last year, I like re-downloaded dating apps, and I was on dating apps. I went out on a date with it, like, and in that, and I just did not feel comfortable with it at all. But I thought that's what I had to do, because I wasn't meeting any new guys or anything like that. And I just at one point heard the Lord say, you do not need this. You feel anxious over this, which then means that this is not of me. So why would I have you do something that is not of me? And I think there are times we have two friends, Miranda and Casey, who go to our church. They met on Tinder. So it's like, and that was a very Lord-filled relationship. So I think there are times like when the Lord will use dating apps in that sense. But for me, it's been apparently clear that that's not how I'm going to meet my husband. So it's kind of, again, like Abraham and Sarah, just trusting in the Lord, even though it may take a really long time. One day it's going to be apparent of why.
Yeah, for sure. Psalm 33, 20 through 22. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. Yeah, I think that speaks for itself. It just shows, like, when I hear, like, he's our help and our shield, I think of him, like, shielding us and protecting us. And it's like, that's just in and of itself a really big comfort, knowing that the Lord is, like, obviously we know the Lord is always there. He's always with us, but it's just like knowing that he just has this protection over us during that.
Yeah. Sorry.
You can share that, and then I had a question.
Okay. Isaiah 30:18. Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are those who wait for him.
Well, this is actually super funny. I have one more verse, and then I have a question, but this is funny. Isaiah 40:31. So in college, our college ministry was called SOAR 4031, because SOAR, like an eagle, because we were the Eagles, and also because Isaiah 40:31, it says, but they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They should run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. That's just funny. That was one thing that came to my mind when we talked about waiting. But my question for you was, I know you shared a little bit about James being your book back when you were waiting on your job. Do you have a verse or a book that has been super beneficial to you as of right now through your waiting season of waiting for a spouse?
I mean, like, the story of, like, honestly, all the stories that we listed off earlier have been really, for me, like, a great reminder. I think even, like, the story of Ruth waiting for her husband is also really, like, powerful, because Ruth never expected to get remarried, and then but she also didn't want to be alone. So just, like, rereading that story about her, because obviously I have never been married, so I can't feel that, but I do know what it's like right now searching for a husband. I think a really awesome, like, book that's not in the Bible that I read in college that's really great for situations like this is called Am I Enough by Grace Valentine. It was the one I showed you yesterday. It's basically, she, like, breaks down a bunch of lies, like, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not talented, like, different things like that. It just kind of breaks it down. It's like a little testimonial, like, devotional book. It's a really easy read. And like, this kind of will go into things that I've started doing in preparation for my husband. But one thing she talked about in her book was about like having sex before marriage and stuff like that, and something that she does that helps her remind herself to remain pure for marriage, even though she doesn't have her husband, or at least when she wrote the book, she didn't have her husband, is to start writing a journal to her husband, because that is a clear reminder that he is out there somewhere, whether or not it's the guy you're dating at the time. He is out there somewhere, and you want to remain pure for him, and obviously for yourself and for the Lord. But it's just like a reminder that he is out there. And that's something that has been so apparent to me recently, just through things that I've been going through and stuff. And again, like I said earlier in the podcast, and I've said to Nina several times, is our husbands are out there. Like, if you're listening to this, your husband or your wife, and you're waiting in the season, they are out there somewhere in the world. You don't know what they're going through right now. They could be going through a really awful trial, or they could, not even know who the Lord is. And so for something that I've been doing is writing in that journal and making intentional times of prayer over them, and asking the Lord, show me what I need to be praying over this person. Like, tell me what I need to be praying over him right now, because I want to be praying over him now. I'm for me, I feel like I, in a sense, am ready, but obviously the Lord doesn't think I'm ready just yet, or maybe he's not ready or something like that. But you don't have to be waiting to pray over them.
Yeah.
And so getting really in tune with God is important in that, because then it's like, one day I can't wait for the day where I hear like, oh, he's going through this, pray this over him. And then I can write that down in my journal, and then him see that one day, be like, wow, I was actually going through this during that time, and you prayed over me. A good example of this is our friends Georgie and Donovan, who lead our young adult group. Donovan kind of strayed from God for a little bit, and they make jokes all the time. He's like, I don't know how I survived that season of my life. And Georgie'd be like, because I was praying over you. And it's like, we make jokes about it, but it's just like that power of prayer is just so, apparent. And I just think that's so cool. Like, we joke about it with them now, but it's, to Georgie back then, that wasn't a joke. She didn't know who she was going to marry, but she knew she needed to pray over him. So I would definitely highly suggest Am I Enough, particularly I guess if you're a female. It is a little bit more of a female-led book, but I've been going back through some of those pages, but some of the things that she suggested has been really good for me. What about you?
Okay, so as pertaining to the Bible book, a lot recently, I know I shared this a couple weeks ago when we talked about like our devotional podcast, what the Lord was talking to us about, and I shared Philippians 1:21, to live as Christ, to die as gain, and I talked about living as Christ, living just a Christ-centered life. And since then, there have been specifically 3 books of the Bible that have been super beneficial to me recently and have stuck out, and I've been reading a lot recently, and Steph can attest, I feel like I talk about it a lot, but it's okay. It's nice to know that I have people out there that I can talk to about it, and I have friends who are also wanting to learn about the word, so I don't have to just be silent about it. I even shared it like a lot on my Instagram story the other night, and like, I'll just talk about things, if people want to hear. But if you ever want to talk to me about the Bible, please let me know. I will definitely talk to you about it. But specifically, Ephesians, Colossians, and 2 Timothy have been like really big books to me recently, and they've all definitely had different things stick out to me in it. Ephesians, obviously just a banger of a book, but I mentioned this last week, Ephesians 3:14-21, read it. But then also all of Ephesians,
read it.
just read it, literally. Ephesians 4:17 starts talking about the new life that we are living, and then Ephesians 5 talks about how we should walk in that life, and then Ephesians 6 talks about the armor of God. So it's like one after another. Paul just, I like often wonder, was his pen on fire when he was writing? Does he understand like the fire that he's just putting out?
I mean, Ephesians, like the first chapter in Ephesians 1 is all about God's plan. Like, I'm like looking at my notes. It's like I have like boldly, he has a plan, God's plan over mine, trust his timing. Even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us. He chose us in Christ to be holy. And then God's plan, at the right time, he will bring everything together under his authority of Christ, under the authority of Christ.
Yeah. And chapter 2 talks all about grace through faith. And so it's just an insane book. And then looking into Colossians, I just can't even, grasping the preeminence of Christ is just ridiculous. And what does it mean to be preeminent and all that? And then talking about how we're alive in Christ. And then chapter 3, putting on the new self, putting off the old self, looking heavenward, not to earth. And like, And then going into 2 Timothy, it talks about being a soldier of Christ. Like, what does that look like? How are we able to be a soldier? And then just talking about how we should live, how we should preach the word. And insane books. 2 Timothy 2:22-26. Read that. But anyways, I could talk forever about it. But those specifically have been really big books to me, just learning how I should be living, how I need to be living a life pleasing to God. What does that look like? What the holiness that the Lord calls us to, like, what does that look like in my everyday life? And we've been talking about it a lot as a friend group as well. And so those have been things recently that I have been reading, but books that I also have really enjoyed. Jonah brought this up to our group chat the other day. There's this podcast called Becoming Something that is fantastic, and it talks a lot about, they have a lot of different things, and Maddie Trout has just taken over as one of the people on the podcast because the other girl who was on it before had to leave because she has had a baby. But Maddie's on it now, and that's awesome.
Love her.
She's awesome, and I don't know if you listened to the podcast that Jonah sent. It was so good, but the main guy, Jonathan Pekluda, JP, he wrote a book called Outdated, and I read it in December. And it was so good because it talks about how we should be walking in our single season, in our dating season, what marriage should look like. How do you know who you should get married to? What kind of a person are you looking for? And just talks about the godliness that we should be looking for and we should strive for in relationships. And so that was a super good book to read. And then I have a few other books I haven't read yet that I'm excited to read that are all about marriage, single, dating, engaged, married. I want to read.
I have that.
I have it. Haven't read it yet.
I've had that for probably 5 years and I've never read it.
Yeah, I want to read that. Boundaries is a good book that I've started reading. I've started reading it like a year ago and I just need to continue to pick it up. Mm-hmm. The Meaning of Marriage, like a bunch of different books that you can read that talks about these subjects, because I was talking to a friend about this. Like, marriage is such a big thing. It is a big deal. You are making a commitment. You need to understand that that is a big deal. So when we are talking about these things, we need to not take them lightly because, yeah, it's going to be awesome. But we also need to know that we need to make sure that we're striving for the right things within those relationships.
Yeah. I think it's also important and to remember is like, and it's crazy because you started talking about 2 Timothy and I have a whole thing I want to share here in a second, but I think sometimes and I can just speak this on myself. I think sometimes in the waiting season, it's like, well, if I just had a husband, if I just had a man, and like, there are sometimes I can't lie. Like, you know, like I don't like going grocery shopping alone. It'd be nice to have a guy to get to do stuff like that with me. And one day that will happen and it will be great. But we have to remember, like, just being in those relationships is not going to fix our problems.
Yes.
And I want to read this whole bit, so just bear with me here, but it's in 2 Timothy 4. It starts in 16. It says, "At my defense no one stood by me, but everyone deserted me. May it not be counted against them, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that I might fully preach the word and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil work and will bring me safely into heaven's kingdom, to be the glory forever and ever, and amen." And then in the devotional that Nina and I read daily, there's this whole section. I literally wrote it down in my Bible and I just put bullet points. No one can be the source of your identity. No one can be the basis of your happiness. No individual can give you a reason to get up in the morning and to continue. No loved one can be the carrier of your hope. No one is able to change you from the inside out. No human can alter your past. No one person is able to atone from your wrongs. No one can give your heart peace and rest. Asking another human to do those things is like requiring them to be the fourth member of the Trinity and then judging them when they fall short. Only God can be these things for you. That is why he should always be number one. And so that's something that I've been holding really true, because there's been a couple instances I can even speak of this year where, you know, it's thinking about getting into a relationship or you know, thinking of what ifs with certain people, and then realizing to myself, it's like, do I like them because they're there, or and then it's like, wow, in that season, was I putting them like, I can speak this over any past relationship I've ever had. It's like, have I been putting them above God? And that's why there are times where I'm like, I'm so ready for a relationship, and then there's moments where I'm like, maybe I actually am
Maybe not.
Like, so I think it's just, I think number one, the Lord has us wait for various reasons, but the main one is to strengthen us,
To prepare us.
I literally have on my mirror, waiting equals his preparing. That's something that one of our pastors, Brittany, sent to me, and I put it on my mirror because I think it's so important. But also for us to grow so much closer to him in the waiting, because one day, like I keep saying, one day we're no longer gonna have to wait for this anymore. And it's important for us to remember everything that the Lord like had us go through in that season and strengthen us while we were in that season. Because I'm all over the place right now, but one of my favorite parts of Joseph was when he had just been in prison, and was it Pharaoh? Yeah, Pharaoh was having all these dreams, and Joseph
was interpreting the dreams.
And I'm trying to remember exactly where in it is, but anyways, it's when he had his children. He basically said, like, I wish I could find it. I'm trying to like go through it so quickly. But I've been trying.
Genesis 37 is where Joseph begins.
Yeah, but it's definitely Joseph's dream. Here we go.
It's Potiphar, by the way.
Oh,
Potiphar's
yes.
wife. But yes, it is Pharaoh.
Yeah, but it's in 4150. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of famine arrived. Asenath, daughter. Okay, we're not even gonna say that. Okay, anyways, his wife bore them. Joseph named the first one Manthea. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering these names, but it's God has made me forget all my hardships and my whole family. And the second son named Ephraim, again, so sorry, God has made me fruitful in the land of my afflictions. So basically what I gathered from that is that when he had his 2 sons, it all made sense. All the hardships that he went through, he forgot about all those in one instance, because in that moment everything was worth it to lead him to that moment. And I just think I can't wait till I get married, and like I feel that. I can't wait till I have my children, and I feel that. And it's going to be even so much cooler for us to get to come back and even listen to this episode of the podcast and see all the growth. Like, I don't even know what the next year is going to hold for the 2 of us, but all I can say that Nina and I have done so much growth this past year. We're completely different people than we were the end of last July.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
Like, I can think of all the blessings that the Lord has given us, like in the last year. Like, he gave me my best friend. He's grown our community more. He gave me a new job, like all these many blessings. So, and my dad always reminds me, you never know what could happen tomorrow.
You don't. And okay, bro, I have so much to say after you saying that. Literally, okay, that off the point of like, when we are doing things, we need to make sure that we're not like, we're here to please God. We're here to grow together in him. If the Lord is making us wait, we need to continue to just make ourselves grow in him, be content. And it made me think of, well, you were talking about 2 Timothy, and 2 Timothy 2 is talking about being a good soldier of Christ. And it talks about that in blah, 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 blah. Verse 4, no soldier gets entangled in civilian pursuits, since his aim is to please the one who enlisted him. We're not here to please other people. We're here to please God. And it even like reminds me of in Ephesians, it talks about how we are not here to please others. We're not here. It literally says as people pleasers, but we are bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. So it's like, that's all in Ephesians 6:5-9. But it's talking about how we're not here to please others. We're not people pleasers, which is difficult for me as a Enneagram 2, because I just like to make people happy, and I just want to do things that help people.
You don't want to be a burden. The day we moved Nina in, she I literally had to keep looking at her, be like, you're not a burden. We want to be here. If we didn't want to be here, we would leave. Like, I had to keep looking at her and say that over her, because like, I know people give the Enneagram a bad rep, but it's moments like that where I'm like, you're being a 2 right now. I need you to not.
It's hard, because then it's like, I know people have other things that they need to do, and I don't want to like interrupt their time. But regardless of the fact, it literally calls us to not be people pleasers in the word. So like we're not here to please others. And even First Thessalonians 4 talks about how we need to be, as I almost dropped my mic, living a life that's pleasing to God. But also in 2 Timothy 2:13, it says, if we are faithless, he remains faithful. The Lord is going to continue to remain faithful regardless. But we need to be faithful in him as well. There was something else I was going to talk about. I don't remember.
I guess.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're getting kind of long-winded here. But
I guess I kind of said like the whole journal thing was something that I've been doing in the season of prep, and of course praying. And I think I also expressed how I felt like the Lord was encouraging me to start a Pinterest board and different things like that, and start imagining myself as a bride. That's been giving me comfort and peace during this season of prayer, during the season of waiting. What have you been doing? Just, do you have any advice for the listeners?
Yeah, I also have letters to my husband that has been written, and I have a few other things that will go in there that one day I'll give to him. Mm-hmm. One thing more recently, it was maybe like a month or two ago, I really felt encouraged that I should write a list.
I did that in college,
which I had never, and we even talked about yours on the relationship episode.
Yeah.
I had never really written a list. There's ideas of things that I wanted, but I don't think I was ever really in the right space for me to write a list. And now that of where I am, like Steph said, the amount of growth that we've both made in the last year, I think that I finally felt like, you know what, like this is something that is going to happen, based on, things that I know true to my own life. But knowing that as we're getting older, that becomes more of a reality. Like, I'm not saying a relationship is reality right this second for me, but it's something that we're moving towards. That's something that we desire. And at some point the Lord is going to, provide to us if, that's in his will. So it's like, I want to make sure that when that time comes, I'm actually looking for the right things. And so after a lot of prayer and just reading in the word, like things that I want in a husband. And so I finally made a list after a really long time. I don't know if I've showed it to you yet. Have I?
I don't know. Maybe.
I might not have. I don't think I've showed anybody, but that was one thing recently, just really reflecting on the people that I am surrounding myself with as well, because we want to make sure that we're continuing to grow ourselves in godliness every day, as well as, praying that over our husbands. So definitely praying for him as well. And so it's been pretty good.
My list, we have a friend, because it's like we were all talking about our list, and this is what was encouraging Nina to make a list. But it's like we have a friend who, like, y'all, I'd encourage you to do it. It feels good. It's just like write down the things that you would like in a spouse, even like maybe pray to God, and God will kind of lift it to you. But we have a friend, and I won't say the person's name, but she put something like must have an iPhone.
Honestly,
and her boyfriend has an iPhone, but it's like, it's so funny because we laugh about that, but it's like it's in prayer. So my list, I remember I made with my friend Colleen my freshman year of college, because I liked a guy, and the guy found out and didn't like me back, and it was a whole ordeal, and my like little heart was shattered. And and so my friend Colleen was like, she's like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna write a list. And it's like a list, I think, of 20 or 30 things, and it's like things like must love the Lord, must have a good relationship with my dad, must tolerate my Disney obsession. I even have one that's like will allow me to, and we put in quotes, borrow hoodies, because I dated a guy who refused to let me wear any of his hoodies, so I would sit there freezing because he knew I wouldn't give them back. But it's just like little things like that are kind of hilarious, but it's like one day I'll have all those things. And like making that list when I was 18 years old and reminding myself that he is out there somewhere is really, really nice. And the Lord's going to be fruitful in that. And I have it actually taped to the journal that I'm writing all of the letters to my husband on. So one day I'll give it to him so he'll get to see that.
Mine has 15 things on it, but I will share one of them because I think that this is something that I would encourage everybody to have on their list. All you women out there. Pursues me and the Lord actively, because I believe that women should be pursued, and I believe that we, you know, as the Lord pursues us, the man should pursue us as well. And I believe that, I just can't wait for the day. And I said this to Olivia last night as we're watching. I was like, I just can't wait to be pursued one day. And like, I think that'll be great one day when we, like you said, Steph, I think that it's going to make so much sense. And I even look at like, Maddie Pruitt Trout that we were talking about.
Love Maddie.
Maddie Pruitt. She has on her Instagram, and her best friend Janine just got engaged as well. And like, they both talked about how after they went on their first date with now she's married and Janine's engaged, but like they both ran into each other's room and was like, I'm going to marry him. Like, I can't wait to have like that go on. And I'm not saying it's going to happen exactly like that, but I just can't wait for like to be pursued and to be able to walk through that with my friends now and just be able to be like, wow, this was, like you said, this was all worth it.
Well,
and I can't wait for that day.
Yeah, like we're saying, like we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know, like things, like in a year, things can look so, like I could tell you now, my life looks a lot different than I thought it would have been a year ago. So who knows? And it's just, it honestly makes life a little bit more exciting because it's like, oh, what am I going to be like the end of next July? I'll be 26.
Crazy.
I'm going to be so old.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, anyways, we have talked your ear off today.
Yeah, but I think it was a good.
Yeah.
I think if anything, we just want to say that this is a season that we're both in, and we're not perfect in it. There have been days of struggle. There have been so many tears shed, but we also are reminded of everything that the Lord has done in our lives, and that's something that when someone has encouraged me, and it's like, the Lord has done so much in your life. Why do you think he would not do this?
Yeah.
And so
he's came through every time before. He's provided every time before. Why would he not provide now?
Yeah. So it's just trusting in him.
It just might look differently than we think, and that's okay.
Yeah. But again, one day I'm going to look at you in a freaking not a bridesmaid's dress. Well, maybe for my wedding, but I'll look at you in your wedding dress and be like, it all makes sense. I can't wait for that.
It'll make sense way before that though.
I know, but it's like,
wait.
It will, but like I have this vision in my head and you in like this white dress and me coming up to you right before you walk down the aisle. Be like, it all makes sense.
Anyways,
we're super appreciative if you listened to this entire episode. Nina just pulled a hair off her mic.
There was a hair on my mic.
But anyways, we love you guys. We love doing this podcast. Even though I can say both of us, there are times where we like don't want to record. Every time we do, we feel much better and much more fruit-filled afterwards. So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
But anyways,
we'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your day.
Peace and blessings.
Bye.